Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another football transfer forum. And we're into September already. You can book your Christmas table at the local pub. The advent calendars are in Asda. And if the country carries on going what it's like, Tony, you're going to need to buy me my Christmas present sooner rather than later, or else it won't arrive.
Hey, listen, honestly, this webinar just straight after the summer transfer window. I should have still been in bed today, to be perfectly honest with you. So things seem to be moving on. Summertime's finished, transfer window's done. But we've got a lot to sort of look forward to. And, I love Christmas just as much as the next man, Ryan, but it's far too early to start talking about Christmas.
I'm not a massive fan of Christmas personally. But that's like a self-help webinar, not a football.
Christmas is preparation for the January window, as you well know.
Yeah, I just being nice to family members, that type of stuff doesn't come naturally to me. And the nights are drawing in. Like it's football season. This is what it's all about. So welcome to everybody that's tuning in. We're going to have a really good chat for the next hour or so. We've got a lot to get through, as well as Tony has just said. We're going to be dissecting what has and hasn't happened in the transfer window. In fact, let me share with you what we're going to get through today, and that will give me a good excuse to introduce our special guest today as well. Tony, I'll introduce you again. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not really well rested, but I am good. Yeah. Everything's good. Perfect.
Fantastic. Excellent. So Tony and myself, we're going to have a little chat to begin with about the rebirth. I'm sure when Boris was putting his plans together of restarting the economy, he had the Football Transfer Forum live at the absolute centre of his policy decision making, Tony. We've obviously got that date in the diary, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit and what people can expect and what we're hoping to get out of it. And then this morning, we are joined by Paul Musa from What the Footie podcast. Paul, good morning.
Thank you for the invite, Ryan and Tony. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are you looking forward to Christmas, Paul?
Do you know what it is? It's a funny one hearing both of you talk. I'm someone who I kind of look forward to once you kind of get the Christmas shopping for the food kind of done around then. So I won't be putting out any trees yet. No.
Ryan, you've jumped the gun. This isn't the Christmas episode. It's September, mate.
Listen. It's important. It's not me that's jumping the gun. It's Asda and Aldi.
All right. Okay.
This is. Paul, I asked you just off air there, but for the benefit of the people tuning in, what's the shirt behind you? What colours are you sporting there?
Yeah, so it's I'm actually an Arsenal fan, but a guest of mine from FC Schalke. He sent me over a Schalke scarf, so I kind of just hang it in the background when I do some of my podcast recordings. So yeah.
Well, we're really excited to first of all hear all about the podcast, because I know you've done a lot now and you've had some great guests, and really going to be interested to ask you about the sort of art of it, what people get out of it. What's the point of doing it? And I think for a lot of the guys tuning in today as well, maybe it's something that they should try and do a bit more of and get themselves out there. But of course, later on, we'll be asking you your own thoughts on what's gone on in the transfer window as well. And then a little bit later, like I said, we'll be dissecting the summer transfer window, and hopefully we'll be having one or two additional people come on to help us talk about it. So, right. Let's crack on with the day. Tony, hopefully people have seen the announcement about the Football Transfer Forum live. It will be coming up to 2 years since the last one. Do you want to just say a few words about the next event?
Yeah, the last one was in December 2019. Can you believe that, at Anfield? It was a really good event. I was really pleased with it. But I think it was the 3rd of December, something like that. So it's almost 2 years since we've done a live event, and obviously we've been sort of filling. We started the webinars. It was Guy Branson's idea, just as a sort of to keep things ticking over, because we were expecting to have one last summer, then and on it goes. So we've done the webinars for 18 months now, but we're delighted to get back to a live event. Ryan and I visited Leicester City Football Club, which obviously is a fantastic club. It's very much on the up. Obviously, we have Guy as usually one of our guests, and they've got a new training ground. They're riding high in the Premier League. They've obviously got Europa League football. So it just seemed like a really fitting place to have our live event. And we're going to talk a little bit, aren't we, Ryan, about how it works for people who haven't been before. But basically, the live event brings together people from football clubs, football agents, sports lawyers, and also companies that operate in that space. We've done really well over the years. We've helped some companies launch. We've introduced some companies to the marketplace. We've enabled companies to get tie-ups with each other and work together through the Football Transfer Forum. And I think there's one thing that's really stuck with me. I haven't done a Zoom this month. I haven't done one Zoom. The last time I was on a webinar was this time in August. And I think I'm getting out and meeting people. I think I went to about 5 matches last week. It was great to see people. And football people, it's just great to see each other in the flesh. You know, you can have an informal chat on the pitch side or in the boardroom or wherever. But it's just really nice to see people in person. And I'm hoping, bloody hell, this is a long introduction, Ryan, isn't it? I planned for this, and I'm hoping some of the people that we've met via Zoom, and it's been fantastic. The webinars have been really great, and I've been really pleased with them. But there's nothing like, meeting in person. I always talk about, your connections as an agent, and probably the people who work for clubs as well, the sporting directors. You're sort of only as good as your network sometimes. And if you can get a very good network, build good relationships with people in the flesh, it's worth its weight in gold. I sort of go, I've got a lot of connections on LinkedIn. That's fine. And, messaging and back and forward. If I can meet them for a coffee and say hello, that's even better. If I can have a phone conversation, great. But if I can meet them in the flesh at somewhere like the Football Transfer Forum, that goes right to the top of the list, because you're right on topic, you're right on point, and you're building your network.
Yeah. So, Tony, do you just want to just say a few words in terms of how it works on the day and how we structured it? That seems to have gone down really well.
Yeah, I mean, we've done 4 live events, so this will be the 5th edition, and I think every single year we've tweaked it. We've talked to the people who've come along, we've talked to our audience, and we've tweaked it. And I think we're almost there on the format. We'll have 3 Football Transfer Forum expert speakers throughout the day. We get everyone together to listen to those speakers. And if you have a look, I've got a link to share with you, but some of the past speakers, we've had Dan Ashworth, Adrian Bevington, Lee Darnborough, Steve Walsh, really top level speakers. Obviously, those ones are all from the football club side, but also agents. We've had Martin Filson, who's a leading agent with the Stella Group. So, and we get some really interesting people. The last curveball we threw in last year was Kieran Mcguire. Now, Kieran Mcguire was relatively unheard of in football finance. What a 2 years he's had. He hasn't looked back since he did the football. I'm not claiming that we set him on that path to.
I am.
Are you claiming it?
I'm claiming that we were sold. There's nothing to do with the work that he's done. It's solely down to him coming on our event.
We were the launch pad for Kieran Mcguire. Well, if Kieran's listening, I don't know, you can put something in the chat, but I'm not sure about that. But we certainly, I like to throw a curveball in, somebody new, somebody that you haven't potentially heard of. We had Professor Simon Chadwick speaking about China in one of the early editions. We've had Tom Markham, who, he's got a fantastic CV. He's He's one of the leading drivers of Football Manager. He's even had a film out. He's even put buyers into clubs, and he was very heavily involved in the takeover of Wigan Football Club. So we've got, well, this is the job from now. Now the transfer window's closed. Myself and Ryan have got to line up those 3 top speakers for our next event. We haven't got there yet, but we'll be going for the very best speakers that we can possibly get. And I've written to all our previous speakers and invited them to the event. And I think every single one of them has said, yes, they'll be there. Did I mention the date, Ryan, or have I not done that?
Not yet, Tony, not yet.
Oh, it's a drum roll for later, is it?
You can do it now if you want.
Yeah, so it's Wednesday, the 24th of November at Leicester City Football Club. It's a full day. Like I say, we have 3 expert speakers. Do you want to talk a bit about the networking, Ryan?
Yeah. I think, look, the people on this call, may well have been to lots of football events. And I think when Tony and I sort of sat down to design the Football Transfer Forum, one of the first conversations that we had was, what did we like from some of the other events, and what did we dislike, and what was it really important for people to come out with at the end of the day. Now, the top priority for me is what pastries they serve in the morning. I like those ones like with custard in. That's like number 1 for me. But for many other people, it's obviously the networking. And on the Football Transfer Forum, the way we have it set up, we have a bit of a sort of speed dating network, but it's there in a sort of formal way for you to exchange details, give a little bit of information about yourself, speak directly to a club. So we have all the clubs sitting on tables. You get to book your own meetings, all that good stuff. And then you're able to have that first interaction that you can then follow up with in a more deeper, meaningful meeting later on at another time. And so what it means is you are pretty much, as long as you do it properly, guaranteed to come out that day with having met 20, 25 potentially new people, potentially clubs, all that stuff. So it's done in a way really to manufacture, at the end of the day, us having certainty that the people that come are leaving with new contacts. They've met the people that they've not been able to meet in a long time, and it's not endless content as well. So we only have sort of 2 or 3 bits of content in the day that's not overkill. And then obviously we treat you to something nice to eat as well.
I think Ryan had done some speed dating before, but not of this.
Well, that's it. That's why it works so well.
I'd never done the speed dating before. Honest. But it does work really well. And what I try to do as well is we try to balance the audience. I've been to numerous Y Scouts. I've sat both sides of the table as an agent and working for a club. And what we try to balance out is the numbers of people from clubs with the number of agents and the numbers from companies. So there's a nice balance. So it isn't, 10 agents trying to clamour for one to speak to one club. It's, I think it's about 1 to 2, something like that. So we try and put a ratio in there to balance the audience. So it's a really, really good mix, and it works on the day. And look, we're getting better at it. I've seen lots of online platforms where you ask people for a meeting and they don't turn up. People who are there on the day have meetings and hopefully go away with some, good contacts. And then, towards the end, there's opportunities for informal networking. Of course there is. And we have a social evening, don't we, Ryan, which I think you particularly enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, we'll let everyone know. It's, like I say, it's Wednesday the 24th of November. I've sort of picked that date. There's an international break just before it, and then that week is a real good football week. So there's EFL games Tuesday, Wednesday. There's evening. There's Champions League games Tuesday, Wednesday. I think Chelsea are playing on the Tuesday, and obviously It's only an hour on the train up to Leicester for the Wednesday for the event. And actually the next day, Leicester have got Legia Walsall in the European League, I'm going to say, on the Thursday night. So, if people are tuning in from abroad and you want to come and you want to get some club visits in, this would be a great week to come. Lots of football activity, the football transfer forum right in the middle of it, and games, and obviously then you move on to the weekend games. So we've got midweek and weekend games. So if you're coming for the week, make sure you come for the football transfer forum, and you can get a lot of contacts and a lot of meetings in preparation for what is the January transfer window. Now, you talked about Christmas, but I know what people are like at clubs. You might have missed one, just hit the post with a signing you were trying to make. You want to make sure he comes in January. I bet meetings have been happening this week already. I've tried to have a bit of a sleep in, but it hasn't been successful. I'm still working up at 6. But, I bet clubs are having meetings next week about, what the plans are for January. They've probably even had them before. There's a lot of people who are ahead of the game, and they're probably looking at summer 2022, Ryan. But no, I mean, I'll put a link in the chat. What we're actually doing with the forum is register your interest, and then when we start getting the tickets out, which will be the back end of September, we'll be writing to those people and offering the tickets out. So let me just I'll share the link for it. I think I've got it. I'll just share it in the chat. Just hold on a second. Yeah, here we go. I know we've had quite a lot registered already. I sort of went a bit too soon with me marketing. We'd already got the things arranged, so I put it out there. But really, we're going to start promoting it in September, when everyone's been busy for the last 2 or 3 months. So we'll really start promoting the event. And as we secure our speakers, our guest speakers, we'll obviously let you know through LinkedIn, through Twitter, and through the Eventbrite platform where the tickets are going to be held. Ryan.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, hopefully we can see as many of you down there as possible. I think it's going to be the biggest one that we've ever done, Tony. I know there's a bit of a sort of pent up demand. They are great days, and really looking forward to being at Leicester as well, who, of course, as you said, have been on a great journey the last couple of years as well.
And just to segue in, I've invited Paul along. Paul's going to hopefully be able to do a sort of What the Footie-esque podcast live at the event-ish sort of thing, Paul. We haven't worked out the details, but you're going to come along, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate the invite.
Good stuff. Excellent. Well, that's a sort of nice segue into introducing Paul. Paul, you're a different kind of guest for the Football Transfer Forum webinar. We used to have in sort of agents or people working in with clubs, but I think it's really interesting to get yourself on, mainly because, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, obviously over the last 2 years, the volume of people, I mean, sort of ourselves included, doing webinars, doing podcasts has exploded massively. So do you want to start off by just telling us a bit about yourself and a bit about the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I host the What the Footie podcast. My main sort of day-to-day is I'm actually a trainee solicitor, and I was just really keen to just understand more about the business behind football, and I almost felt as though many people in the game, and whether that's fans, whether that's people who work in the game, people aspiring to get into the game, wanted to really understand more, because we're almost seeing the different intersections almost crossing over with football, whether that's private equity, whether that's data and technology, whether that's in terms of multi-club ownership, and different sort of trends coming in. So the main sort of premise of the podcast was to go behind the scenes, speak with fascinating people, and discuss and hear the stories, the big ideas, the themes, and the trends that are going on, really.
Okay, so it's not just the playing, it's not just the players. You're getting involved in all the different issues as well.
Yeah, definitely. So far I've done 43 episodes, and I just recently just launched my website where I've sort of split everything up into 7 categories. So we have stuff with agents like Tony, who's come on recently. Thoroughly enjoy that one, Tony.
Listen, don't pat me on the back, because it won't feel sincere. I know, obviously, I really enjoyed it. It was really good crack, and that's why we wanted you to come on here. So thanks for that, Paul.
Yeah, so obviously people like Tony, Toby Wakefield, who works with Jesse Lingard, Eddie Bonsu over at Elite, athletes as well. So people like Chris Kirkland have come on, and I've always found it fascinating speaking with players and getting their perspective on the business behind football. So the first episode having two players who were at the West Ham Academy, just speaking about the realities and the highs and lows of academy football. Even Chris Kirkland looking back on his career and sort of the things that he kind of went through as well, speaking with strategic leaders in the game as well. So people like Les Reed, Anna Mitchell at Portsmouth as well, and getting that sort of high level overview and perspective as well. Performance as well. So scouts and coaches, Steve Morrow, who is head of youth scouting at Arsenal now at the FA, Neil Bamfield as well, coaching at QPR. And just speaking to different people and just getting different perspectives on the business behind football, really.
That's absolutely fascinating. And what I wanted to ask you was, what role do you think webinars, podcasts now play in part of almost people's sort of self-promotion, really? We talk about being on LinkedIn, we talk about sort of getting out there and networking. Is getting yourself on a podcast and things like is that now part of that mix?
Yeah, I think it's important in terms of obviously building your personal brand, and I think irrespective of kind of where you are along the journey. So like a lot of students sort of reach out to me, because prior to obviously doing this, I didn't really have a background in football. I've got some news coming soon on LinkedIn about where I'm kind of going next for my next rotation.
Paul, give us an exclusive. Come on, football transfer. We want a big exclusive.
So I'm currently working at a law firm, and my next secondment, I'm going off to a sports-based client. So and I definitely feel as though maybe some of the stuff I've done within the podcast sort of space and understanding the game as well was kind of helped me to kind of get that as well. So
Paul, when you mentioned your own personal brand, just expand on that, because I've heard that statement a few times, and just expand on it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think just sort of by that, really, it's the whole idea of it's just kind of getting yourself out there. Like a lot of things are a crowded market, whether you're a student trying to get into the sports industry, whether you're an agent trying to get a player, whether you're trying to get a job at a football club, whether you're trying to do any sort of deal, really. So it's a case of how do you really stand out, and how do people really recognize you and like, okay, that's Tony, that's Ryan, that's Paul, kind of thing. So
I mean, a lot, our audience is made up of people from clubs, agents, companies, and I suppose being recognizable, if your CV hits a CEO's desk and they think, oh yeah, I've seen him or her from a podcast, or I've listened to something. Do you think that'll help them in the interview process and the actual job process?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like even I read Stuart King, who was actually a guest on a podcast as well back in episode 29. I read a blog he did with Transfer Room yesterday, and he was saying a similar sort of thing in terms of your CV, whether you're going for a job as a technical director, whether you want to get any sort of job within football, really just really standing out and doing things that's going to get your name and your brand out there, really.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. Can you talk to us a bit about the skills of speaking to somebody? I know it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But I think I look at the people that are on the webinar today, and the vast majority are involved in conversing with people, and having to describe things and describe players or the situation. What tips would you give? I'd done a bit myself, and I had a great bit of information once about when you're on the telly or the radio, try and slow down. You try and slow down your speech a little bit, because then you don't not rushing and falling over your words. But what advice would you have to anybody that does get invited or does get themselves on a webinar or a podcast?
Yeah, I think the best thing is obviously first and foremost just kind of enjoy it as well. I think that's overlooked a lot of the time as well, and just kind of being clear and concise and being able to really just give detail as well. I feel like detail is really important, because when you're coming on a platform like this, or whether it's a podcast, the audience really want to hear from people. Like Tony mentioned, the sort of caliber and the sort of level of guests coming to the webinar as well, and people are coming to listen to someone like Dan Ashworth speak about what he achieved with England and the FA, and being able to go into those high level details is really important. So yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of content out there, isn't there? And it's a very sort of crowded space, isn't it? Sort of football podcast space. I think it's probably the most crowded space. It's quite hard for people to sort of disseminate, isn't it? Because there's some really good stuff, and there's some stuff that I've listened to as well that's just I think people need sectioning. What advice would you have in terms of for people trying to find the good stuff? Where do you go to find the good stuff and the interesting stuff?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing especially with podcasting, in terms of discoverability and search. The best and easiest ways is just through sort of word of mouth. So doing stuff like this, and obviously Tony coming onto my podcast as well, and sort of sharing it with his audience, kind of giving me that thumbs up, and sort of just going through avenues like that, really, because it's very, very difficult to compete, as you mentioned, because there's so much competition out there, and just kind of finding ways to just think outside the box, really. So yeah, definitely Google, speaking with people, and just kind of seeing and keeping your eyes and ears to the ground, really.
Yeah, Paul, I've never been shy about talking about money, and as an agent you can't, but are you monetizing it, or what? How does that work? Is that something for the future, or is that something for now?
Yeah, so I think that's something more sort of planned later down the line. I'm just trying to just continue to get sort of high level guests to come on and sort of grow the audience and grow the listenership, and just continue to do more stuff like this, really, and go into other webinars and podcasts and sort of speaking about what I'm doing, and I think stuff like that will inevitably come later down the line, really.
So I can see here from our attendees that there's a few people here who could really benefit from being on podcasts similar to yours, but yours especially. How do they go about it? Will you be able to leave some contact details for them, or put something in the chat or whatever to get contact with you, so that if and obviously they need to be the right caliber, you're building your audience, they need to be interesting people, but our audience fits perfectly well with the What the Footy audience. So and speaking just from me, it was a really professional experience dealing with Paul. But it was also just a very good conversation. We had a very good conversation. It was just like you sat having a coffee. I had a good chat with Paul. He had, I started asking him questions actually, but that's just me. But it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it. So I would say to anyone on here, reach out to Paul if you think you've got something to offer, an audience such as ours.
Yeah. Just a quick one. I want to ask the audience if you could just pop it in the chat box. How many minutes do you think is an appropriate length for a podcast? I'd just be interested to see what people in the audience think. But Paul, I'll come to you. Where do you think is the balance? Like, I do quite a bit of driving, so I don't mind listening to sort of longer podcasts. But where do you work to?
Yeah, so for me, I think that was actually one of the, like, when I first sort of started, one of the main things I was looking at is the content being digestible.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's almost a cutoff point, and I see Tom put sort of 60 minutes in there. Like originally, I sort of planned for it to be around sort of half an hour, 40 minutes. But then when you're getting on guests like people like Les Reed, who have just so many amazing stories to tell, those ones can go up to about an hour or so.
Are you just sort of going with the flow? If the conversation's flowing and it's a good webinar, it lasts forever or whatever, or not forever, do you know what I mean? But it lasts a reasonable amount of time. And then if it's not really, just I suppose what's appropriate or what feels right.
Yeah, so I just always sort of frame the question. So obviously, like with Tony, when he came on, we sort of spoke around the whole idea of sort of player transfers, player contracts, and I always end it with that sort of what the footy question. So I kind of always know when's a nice sort of point to cut it off. Otherwise, me and Tony and I would have been speaking for 3 hours like a Joe Rogan podcast.
Peter has put 35 to 50 minutes. Peter, you cannot sit on the fence like that on here. That's too big a spread. What's the actual minutes? Because then we'll aggregate
35 then, wouldn't it? It'd be 35.
35 maybe. It's interesting. Paul, who have you got next up?
Yes, so next up, I've got a friend of mine actually he's actually featured on the podcast before. His brother is plays at Arsenal, Florian Balogun, and just really keen to. Me and him did a similar episode about a year or so ago when I first sort of started, and I'm just sort of keen to understand more from his perspective. Obviously, seeing his brother and obviously in the limelight now, the pressure that comes with it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Is he older brother, younger brother?
Older brother, yeah.
Older brother. So there's a little bit of helping and mentoring in that. Is he an agent, his brother, can I ask?
No, he's not. He's actually not an agent, but he's someone who's quite close to him in terms of giving him advice. And I think we're seeing a big sort of trend now with whether that's Trent Alexander-Arnold, whether that's Marcus Rashford, whether that's Harry Kane, of course, with sort of family members playing that sort of active role. And I think yourself and I spoke a little bit about that as well on the podcast as well.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a trend with family members, parents, siblings. That's a real trend that's happening in the agent community, and I think there's a lot of good reasons for that. I also think the other side, somebody who can be objective. It's hard to be objective when it's your son. I try to be objective with my two boys. They're not footballers though, in just in general life, but it's quite hard at times, isn't it? And football can be a tough business to hear good things and bad things about your family members.
Paul, I'm really keen for our audience to to sort of take this chat and think about can I be doing more, can I be getting myself out there a little bit. So in terms, if they were pitching to you rather than you going to them, tell me what does the email need to look like to sort of spark your interest? Is it just a few bullet points of what they're doing, or you tell me?
Yeah, so I think it's just pretty much that, really, just sort of about themselves, what they're doing, and because I've actually put it in the chat now, I launched my website not too long ago, whatthefooty.com, and I'm trying to have more written content on there as well, because there's so many amazing people who sort of work within football with great stories, great ideas. And obviously not everyone can obviously come into the podcast, but how can I share those stories online to kind of almost push those big ideas, those themes, those trends out there as well? So any sort of medium works, whether that's LinkedIn or whether that's my email address as well, which I'll put in the chat as well. And yeah, always happy to chat with people as well. Okay,
excellent, brilliant, well done. Thank you for that. I thought that's really interesting, Tony. I think for people in our sort of community to try and do stuff. It's so competitive in football, isn't it? And it when you're thinking of that next opportunity, or you're thinking that you've done some good work and you want to get it out, webinars, podcasts, that they are a brand new avenue, aren't they, for the good work people are doing to for that to enter the ether.
Well, it certainly is it was a brand new thing for us back in, what was it, May last year, really, wasn't it? We've been doing webinars and the like. But obviously Paul doing 43, that is some body of work. There was a guy doing he was doing a live stream on Twitch TV for transfer. It came up on my Twitter feed, and he was Fabrizio Romano, I think I'm pronouncing his name, an Italian Sky journalist who's been working on transfers. Everyone loves transfer deadline day, even the agents and the clubs, they love it really, don't they? But him and his pal was sat on a settee, live streaming and talking about transfers, and he was on his phone getting news from his contacts and sources. And put in the chat, how many viewers do you think he had, total viewers? This was a long podcast, a long live stream.
Yeah, 10 hours, wasn't it,
Tony? Yeah, it was something like 10 hours. I literally just flipped in and flipped out to see what he was up to. But if you're in the audience there, just have a guess, how many viewers do you think he had for that live stream? Anyone?
10,000, Tom says.
It was more than that.
Yeah, come on. A little bit more than that. Any advance on 10,000 from anybody?
Should we do like the higher, lower type? But no. But listen, guys, it was 3 million. 3 million.
Yeah.
Now, Paul obviously gets more than that. We get more than that, but he's doing all right for himself, isn't he?
He's not bad for an amateur.
Yeah, something like that. Right.
No, and this is it. So, and I think, Paul, just to finish off, isn't it? I think once it's out there, it's it's out there forever, really, isn't it? As well, and people can come back to the content people have spoken about, and it's not gone. It's not just a radio interview that's disappeared, or a newspaper clipping that will never be released again. It's there on the internet forever.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing about podcasting, because it's evergreen content, and I always try and make sure, for example, like the conversation I had with Tony, that conversation is always going to be relevant. We spoke about release clauses, we spoke about preferred agents, we spoke about potentially agents being good sporting directors. Like that conversation in 3 months' time, 4 months' time, a year's time, you can still go back and listen to it, because we weren't speaking about what was happening next week or yesterday, or so I think that's the amazing thing about it, and that content can be spun into articles, into little presentations, into slideshows, into different forms of content for people to kind of digest over time, really.
Fantastic, excellent. Brilliant, Paul. We'll leave that there for now, but we'll come back to you in respect to some of the other things we want to chat about as well. So thanks for that. Tony, we spoke about it right at the start. The transfer window finished the other day. Yeah. What's been your initial assessment of the summer window?
I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit, but not a lot, because I was sort of half right. Obviously, we've previewed the transfer window, and everyone's been saying loans and frees were going to be the flavour of the day. Even swap deals, we've seen a few swap deals, but not too many, because they're impossible to do. But, the spending was depressed in the Football League. And my take on it was the Premier League would largely carry on regardless. And I think that more or less happened. I also said that the Premier League would benefit from the financial chaos in other leagues, as in Serie A, La Liga, Liga. And I think that was the case as well. I think there was some bargains to be had. I think some of the players and some of the fees paid for players were lower by Premier League clubs than they would have expected in a normal scenario. If it had been, if this hadn't have happened and it was a normal transfer window, I think there was some bargains to be had, certainly. And then, just when we thought it was all going to be, the window was all going to be about Haaland, Sancho, Harry Kane, well, it sort of was about them three. Nothing happened with Haaland. Obviously, Sancho was done very early and, quite quietly, really, with not much fanfare, even though he's a top player. And then the Harry Kane saga, missing a couple of days training, and Daniel Levy digging his heels in. We all thought that was going to dominate the market. And then the biggest players on the planet decide, Messi leaves Barcelona. Barcelona, one of my favorite teams, clubs. I like the ethos. Absolute financial meltdown, financial car crash. A fire sale at Barcelona, one of the biggest and best football clubs in the world. Who'd have thought that, that just shows you the level of financial chaos that, to some extent there was problems already there, but the pandemic has exacerbated them. So Messi's on the move on a free. Then Ronaldo's story comes up, and it's Ronaldo to Man City, and you're thinking, well, what's happening there? And then, a couple of days later, Man United come in for him, and then the Mbappe saga. So the three biggest players on the planet sort of overdid, got all of the attention in the last couple of weeks of the window, and it made for a really, really exciting, obviously those players are on a massive, a level, worldwide superstars that we're talking about. And to have Ronaldo come back to the Premier League was absolutely fantastic. So I think, in sort of summary, it's been a really exciting transfer window. Not a great deal happened on the last couple of days, but, if you want to say Ronaldo, not a great deal happened, but Ronaldo was happening a couple of days before the transfer window was finishing. We all knew it was happening. But what an absolutely outstanding, exciting transfer window. And what I said before, again, I'll repeat, it strengthens the position of the Premier League clubs, and European competition. I think we'll start seeing now even more dominance from Premier League clubs in Europe. Barcelona have got a strike force of Luke de Jong. Newcastle fans will remember Luke de Jong, and Martin Braithwaite. Middlesbrough fans will remember Martin Braithwaite. Yes, they've got some very, very top players as well, but that just illustrates the point. And, obviously Barcelona are always up there, going deep into tournaments, deep into Champions League. They won't be the force that they once were. And that might happen for a few years, until they get the finances right at the club. But, I think business as usual, the Premier League, there was a lot of money spent. Obviously, I haven't even mentioned the Jack Grealish deal, which went really, really smoothly, very quietly, very well done to the agents and to Aston Villa. I thought that was a really good piece of business from Villa. I think City have an embarrassment of riches in that sort of creative attacking players. I really did think City needed the number 9, the striker, maybe not the number 9, the false number 9, or whatever Guardiola wants to play his ultimate goal scorer as. But yeah, so it's just been a really, I thought it was a really exciting, really interesting window, Ryan.
Outside of the Premier League, Tony, talk to us about how the conversation was with clubs there. Loans, freeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Sell before we can buy. That was the sort of mantra. I think that was interesting. Blackburn Rovers, I think Blackburn Rovers really did need to sell Adam Armstrong. I think he had a year left on his deal. They hadn't done any business in the window until Adam Armstrong's deal was done. And then I see they've done 3 or 4 players, and maybe, after Adam Armstrong's come into the building, I think they paid money for 1 player. But when you look at the Championship, I think it was about 25 million maybe spent. That's Joe Willock to Newcastle.
Yeah.
25 million for all of the Championship clubs, and 12 of that was Harry Wilson. So you can see what the other clubs have spent, maybe 13 million. That's the other 23 clubs in the Championship. So there hasn't been a lot of money flying around in the Championship. The correction was there once again. I think Middlesbrough have spent a little bit. I think Stoke may have spent some money. I'm just struggling to see, or Bournemouth will have done something. But really, it was frees and loans. And then looking further down the league, it was almost exclusively frees and loans.
Just referencing Kieran again, I saw a tweet that he put out this morning about Sheffield United, and of course Sheffield United coming down. And perhaps you would have expected them to spend some money, but it looks like they'd already loaned the value of the, or certainly loaned some money that was secured against the parachute payments of relegation. Hence why they haven't really spent any money. I know they took Gibbs White from Wolves on that. But Tony, do you've mentioned the word a few times. Do you see this as a sort of correction, or as in clubs sort of deliberately, trying to fix their position, or is this just a consequence?
No, it's definitely a correction. You've just got to balance your books in some shape or form, haven't you? If the owner's got absolutely pots of money and keeps wanting to put 50 million into the club every season, then fine. And clubs will spend the money if you give them it. The manager will want to spend the money. The sporting director will want to spend the money. And if it's that risk reward of, and this is for every league. It's the risk reward of, if you put some money in, you buy some better players, will you be able to improve and get promotion? And that's the idea. That's what most clubs are trying to do. It's probably players' contracts. There's players still contracted for another 1, 2, even 3 seasons in the Championship who are on very big money, and Championship clubs are now trying to sort of say new players coming in will be on, let's say, less than 10 grand a week, for example. I'm just putting that out there as an example, whereas there'll be still some players in the Championship whose wages are far in excess of that, and they haven't, their contracts have still got 1 or 2 years to run. So it's definitely a correction. It'll take over time, but I can't see, that many Championship clubs spending big money, unless it's maybe the striker. Obviously, Sheffield United sold the keeper, didn't they? That was, what was that? 20 million. And we'll get on to Paul and Arsenal in a little bit, because I know, having spoken to Paul at length, he knows a lot about the Arsenal business, and it's a very interesting, a very interesting scenario what happened to them in the transfer window. But yeah, Sheffield United got that money in, but then I think they did 3 loans. I think they did a keeper, Morgan Gibbs White, and a winger. I can't remember who it was, but they did the loans, so there was a correction there. Ryan?
No, absolutely. And we're joined by football agent Joe Donkor. Morning, Joe.
Morning. How you doing? You well?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for joining us on this discussion. So I'll bring you straight in, Joe. What was your assessment of the summer window?
Well, trying to chase up on that bit of conversation from Tony. Yeah, it was probably was expected, really. The Premier League was the Premier League. The big clubs were spending money on big players, but below that, as Darren McAntony said, there is a recession. Clubs are not taking many risks at all, and I don't blame them, because they probably don't know. Obviously, we've got fans back in the stadium now, and hopefully that continues. But we don't know for sure. So I think everyone's a little bit more cautious. So it just makes sense that if you can get deals done, if you can get loan deals done, or business that is small fees in transfer fees, then get that done. But yeah, the Premier League continues. But even in the Premier League, it slowed down. I mean, you're looking at Liverpool, one signing, Konate coming in. So if a massive club like that, who's had all that success recently, is not spending and holding on to money and being a bit more risk adverse, it shows you how the market went, really. And it was the same in Europe as well. I experienced the same across all the leagues across Europe.
Joe, can I just pick you up on Liverpool, because I know you're by the way, this man's got the best backdrop in webinars, hasn't he? Look at that backdrop. It's a have you done that artwork yourself, Joe? Is that one of yours?
I'd like to say yes, but yeah, it's a very expensive piece that I'm very proud of it, to be honest. But I wouldn't spend that money again on it.
but Liverpool, a couple of newsworthy items coming out of Liverpool. Michael Edwards sounds like he's on the verge of leaving, so that's an issue. I don't know whether you'd heard that news. Yeah. And then when I was looking, I think, was it a centre half that they signed? Yeah.
Konate, yeah.
when I was looking at the squad, there's a lot of 29, 30-year-olds, key players in that Liverpool squad. Yeah. Obviously, they're signing new contracts, they're renewing a lot of the key players. But what's your thoughts about Liverpool? Why was it so just the one deal?
Got to be careful here, don't upset anybody. I don't know why it's one deal. Only they'll know. I do think there's a difference between certain ownership models. I've always said, although Arsenal make me look silly, I guess, but Americans are generally capitalists and want to look after and build things, and I just think the Americans are a bit more risk adverse in sort of spending money. I think likes of Chelsea, Abramovich, and obviously Manchester City have got a lot more available wealth that they can use and tap into, whereas Liverpool have, I guess, we've lost a lot of money, but they've made money over the years, and they're just sort of taking their time and just waiting to see how the market plays out, really. I would like to have seen them do a little bit more business, but like they say, if the players aren't available, they're not just going to do the deals. So you just have to take them for their word. But I think, Konate is a good one to bring in. I wish they brought him in the January, preferably, if possible, because I think that's when we really need him, because I think we still had a chance of winning the league. I think we were top before we started getting all those injuries. So it seems a bit of a delayed transfer, but we'll see what happens. And like you said, we've got a squad that's starting to age now. So it's a bit strange to see a lot of the longer term contracts being given out. You sort of try and think, what's the sort of strategy going on? With regards to Michael Edwards, will remain to be seen if he's still there. He's done a fantastic job. But if it's Julian Ward that goes up to, I know Julian, he's a great guy, so it'll be a great opportunity for him to show what he can do and take Liverpool to the next level. So he'll have some big shoes to follow if he is taken over.
Yeah, I saw that in the media. Julian was the loan manager up there, was that right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Lone Wayne Pathways, I think it was. So previously was Man City, and he came over to Liverpool, and he's a really nice guy. So people speak very well of him as well that I know. So it's a great opportunity.
Joe, is there anybody else sort of outside of the Premier League that sort of caught your eye or gave you cause for concern in terms of what's happened over the summer?
In what sense, cause for concern? How do you mean?
As you know, I've used the example of sort of Sheffield United. Now their sort of all finances have been tied up in what they've tried to do in the Premier League, so they've not been able to do anything. There's obviously the sort of big clubs in League One. It's been interesting to see how they've operated. I mean, what's your assessment of life outside of the Premier League?
I'll tell you which one's interesting. I'm looking at the League One at the moment, as you said. Sunderland top of the league with Lee Johnson. I don't think they've brought in a massive amount, for big money. No. Then you're looking at Ipswich Town and the revolution going on there under Mark Ashton, who I know is a good guy, coming from Bristol. A lot of pressure on them, it seems, because they've been bringing in players left, right, and centre. And if I'm selected, big money. So I've heard without seeing the contracts, but. I think they brought in another one, Morsey from Middlesbrough, on the deadline as well. So I don't know how many that is into their squad. So there's a lot of pressure there on Paul Cook and also for the management to get that team up. And if you look at the table, which I think I did today, you've got some big teams up there. So it's not going to be Sheffield Wednesday, Sunderland, so on.
Well, I was just looking at it now. Ipswich are 21st. They're in the relegation zone.
Pressure's on. I was going to mention that League One because it is a very competitive league this year, isn't it? And the club I was going to mention, who have done a hell of a lot of business, was Wigan. Wigan were just, I think, a couple of points off the relegation zone last season with a very young squad. They've signed some players. They signed James McLean. They signed Charlie Wyke from Sunderland, who was top scorer. Another lad from Sunderland, Jordan Jones from Rangers. So they've got some really good players in Wigan. And when I look at some of their players, I think, they've got a really good chance. If they can gel, obviously they've all come, I think they must have signed 12 or 13 players in the window, all potential, starting players. And if they can gel and get them working as a team from as soon as possible, then they might have a right go at it. And, Ipswich are already behind a little bit. Sunderland have surprised me because it's a very, very young team that they've got up there.
Well, I don't think there's a doubt about Lee Johnson's quality as a manager. So it's good that he's, getting the season underway in a positive fashion. Darren Moore, I've always been a big fan of since he was at West Brom. I thought he was very unlucky to lose his job. And Ipswich will be interesting to see, because they need to have a real good start when they come back from international break. Otherwise, the pressure is going to be really on top, because their drive is to get promoted as quickly as possible in that Championship and build towards the Premier League. So, and we'll see what Paul Cook can do, really.
Interesting. And just quickly going into League Two, just looking at the top two in League Two, guys, it's Forest Green Rovers and Harrogate Town. Not the sort of traditional sort of money spenders there is some money down at Harrogate, but nothing to be overly dramatic about. They've got a small turnover. They're obviously at the mercy of the salary cost management protocol as well. I always like posing this question. We talk about spending big money, Joe, but really, do you subscribe to the notion that certainty only really comes when you're dealing with those top world-class players? If you're buying Grealish, you kind of know what you're getting. When you get down the leagues, the uncertainty becomes greater.
Yes, easy to say, I guess, but I think there's still something to be said about putting a structure in place, and having the right people in place and getting your recruitment right and bringing in the players that are correct for your club and the way you want to play. I think Forest Green have been going in the right direction for a few years, actually. I forget his name now, it's terrible, but I know they've promoted one of my guys to a sporting director role. He's been there for a few years. Everything seems to be very positive. That's right. Yeah, sorry, thank you. They seem to be going in a real positive direction in everything, on and off the pitch. Harrogate, did we not speak to Harrogate Town in one of these forums before?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's really good to see them. And, I think we said before that there's not too big a jump between the National League and League One. So, again, if you're getting everything right off the pitch as well, and then getting the right players, you don't have to spend. I mean, you do need to bring players in. You do need to freshen it up a little bit. But if you've got the right team in place,
that was the point. You sort of hit the nail on the head, Joe. The point that I was going to make, and I think it's the fact that how strong are some of the teams come up from the National League. Harrogate Town came to our first football transfer forum. They were in the National League North then, and they've moved up. And it seems to me that some of the clubs who are getting out of the National League are doing really well in League Two and even flipping up to League One quite quickly. And Forest Green are a good example of that. Harrogate are a great example of that. You've obviously got Salford down there as well, and you'd expect Salford in League Two to be there or thereabouts, wouldn't you?
Bad start again, though, Tony. Bad start.
And when you do look down at that National League, you've got Wrexham. Phil Parkinson and I know Les Reed's gone in there as doing a bit of consultancy work, I think. They've spent money, I think, on players. They've brought big players in who've played league football to try and get themselves out of that National League. And for me, that's the toughest one of all. I was down at Hartlepool last Saturday and speaking to their owner, and they've done such a good job to get out of that league. It's absolutely, it's a tough league. And, one goes up automatically and then the others have a convoluted playoff system.
It's crazy. They throw them all in. I don't know how it works. I don't understand it.
To be honest, I wish they'd just say, look, 3 up. Let's be fair. I couldn't work out how the Hartlepool, who they had to beat, what they had to play. But, credit to the owner. He's done really well to get Hartlepool up, and they've started really well in League Two as well.
Paul, just want to bring you in on here in terms of the guests that you've been speaking to on your podcast. What's the vibe that you've picked up about the transfer window? And then I guess personally, as an Arsenal fan, I guess I mean. Yeah.
You've said enough.
It's the way you drop it, Ryan. You
mentioned the A word.
To be fair, Paul, I do think they'll stay up.
Tony, I'm never coming back on here ever again. I'm never coming back.
Oh dear.
Yeah, no. I think just even going back to and just kind of seeing if things going on, like when I had Tony on there, Tony sort of mentioned seeing quite a lot of loan deals and sort of stuff like that as well. And I remember having sort of Les Reed on there and sort of speaking to him about his philosophy at Southampton and sort of taking a bet on someone like a Sadio Mane playing in the Austrian league and bringing him over. I think we're sort of seeing some of those sort of deals like that as well, whereby sort of those teams like a Southampton or like a Crystal Palace getting Edouard from the SBL was well. I'm surprised more other teams didn't really go in for someone like him or someone like a Leon Bailey coming from an Aston Villa. And I think also as well, like when I spoke with Neil Bamfield, he sort of mentioned how untapped the championship is actually from a recruitment perspective, and Tony mentioned a similar thing there as well. And seeing someone like Adam Armstrong going into a club like Southampton, and I really believe someone like him can thrive there as well. And going on to Arsenal, I think I don't think what we've done in the window has been bad. We have spent a lot of money. Someone like Nuno Tavares playing really well over in Benfica. Ben White, who when he came back from Leeds, a lot of top Premier League clubs like Chelsea were looking to get him there as well, and definitely one for the future there as well. Samuel Onkanga, who was referred to us by Thierry Henry, and is on course to make his national team debut, hopefully this international break. But I think the frustration for a lot of us Arsenal fans is that when you do spend a lot of money on sort of young players and players who are coming in to be embedded into a squad, you have to then go and get that top level player that's going to take us there to the next level. Because I feel like for ourselves, kind of where we finished last season, and we need to get back into the top 6, into the top 4, and getting back to where we want to really belong. Looking at someone like Chelsea who just won the Champions League and going and getting Lukaku and someone like Saul Niguez, it just when you look at the contrast, we're almost a million miles behind from that. And I'd love to know all of your perspective as well on the whole idea of this whole idea of youth projects, because I've been speaking with quite a few friends, and obviously Tony mentioned how Liverpool have a lot of aging players there, and it seems like our strategy now is to get young players, like we have Emil Smith-Rowe and Bukayo Saka, who are sort of like 19 years of age. We're bringing in sort of 20, 21-year-old players, but the difficulty is that they need time to sort of build, and in 2, 3, 4 years' time, when they're 22, 23, 24, they're going to want to go and win trophies. So do these projects actually really work?
I mean, that's I think you've made some really, really interesting points there. And, I think obviously, Tony, what we're seeing at not only at Arsenal, but like, all of the teams that have started off with a bit of a struggle. And I think, the example that Joe put out there in terms of Ipswich, the expectation is so massive. Well, there'll be some casualties, won't there? We'll start to see people getting sacked and players having to be moved on for massive loss of value.
Yeah, listen, it's nice to have some money to spend, and I think, am I right, Paul? Arsenal were the biggest spenders. Was it 150 million Arsenal spent?
Yeah.
And it's nice to have some money to spend further down as well, but you've still got to spend it right. You've still got to recruit, the players that are going to take you to the next level. I wondered about Arsenal's recruitment in terms of how many of those players, and I don't know the answer to this, how many of those players have they bought as starting players, and how many are squad players or players that can, develop into a top Premier League player? I don't know. I think at the moment, Arsenal lead as many good starting players, and maybe to sign 2 really top players for that 150 million might have been a better strategy. I mean, who am I to say? But, it might have been a better strategy to get 2 really top players. And let's face it, the hardest positions in the Premier League are your striker. What did Lukaku go for? And your central defender. Obviously, they paid 50 million for Ben White, so they think he's going to be one of the top centre backs in the Premier League. Now, that remains to be seen. He's not there yet, is he? He's a very, very good player, but he's not there yet. And that would be my thinking of Arsenal. But I think, and that's why we've got a lot of people who work in recruitment at clubs, and, people who work on the commercial side, bringing the sponsorship deals in. It's all well and good, But if your recruitment for your first team, that's the biggest expenditure in the club, and you've got to get it right. So yes, there is pressure on these managers. You expect them to have picked the right players, and the sporting directors to have picked the right players, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's fascinating. The only other one I wanted to speak about before we leave it and we let people crack on with their day is Norwich. Now Norwich, they get almost sort of lauded, don't they? And you know, I think they've done an incredible job down there in terms of having a system that kind of gets them back into the Premier League with a bit of ease. But Joe, is that going to be sufficient indefinitely? They've got off to a poor start. They've lost their best players again. When does that process start to unravel? At what point do they actually have to stay up?
That's up to the club, really, isn't it? It's up to how they want to operate the club. If you look back a few years now, probably a little older than a few of us, but I think West Brom did the same. West Ham did the same. They used to go up and down until they're able to stabilise. So that might be Norwich's situation. I think Stuart Webber's been very clear in terms of that when he arrived there, and also now they don't want to put the club into a position where if it goes wrong, they're chasing their tail again. So that's just up to them. It might not be great for the fans, but if that's communicated, I think if they see that there's a better effort this year in the Premier League, and I think it will be. I think it's a disappointing result from just before the break, you know, where they had the goal disallowed. That would have made a big difference, not losing going into international break. Yeah. But obviously, like I said, it just depends on the club, and also Stuart Webber being there. I think he's a massive driver. You know, I'm a big fan of his. I'm a good mate of his as well, so I always back him up. And I think someone like him, to be honest, is missing from a club like Arsenal, because talking about Arsenal, I live very close to a stadium. I hear all the fans, you know, have a bit of banter with them. You know, most bipolar fans in the country, I say. But is
that including Paul?
No, Paul. I don't know. I've got to see Paul when they win a game and when they lose, and I can tell you the difference. But okay. I mean, my brothers are all Arsenal fans as well, so there's a lot of banter. But I think, you know, people talking about the manager at the moment. I think there's bigger issues at Arsenal. I think their recruitment, I'm really concerned with their recruitment, not just this season, but in the past. If you look at some of the players, them players have to start stepping up. Ben White's a good player, but you know, you're talking 50 million for players played, is it one season in the Premier League? That's a big chunk of money straight off the bat. So you're saying he's got to make it, hasn't he? So a lot of pressure on the club there.
Yeah, no, but on Norwich, you know, obviously you mentioned Stuart Webber. Kieran Scott, who was working with Stuart, has joined Middlesbrough. He's
yesterday.
He's fortunately for Kieran, the window's gone. He can plan for the January window. You know, he's not had to go in with a couple of days of the window and make a few transfers. So we wish him all the best. I think he's been to one of the football transfer forums. You know, I like that Emi Buendia, good player. You know, and part of me thinks a player like him goes and does really well at Norwich, and somebody comes. You know, it's the food chain, isn't it? Somebody higher up the pecking order. And I think Aston Villa have done some really good business. I think, you know, they sold Grealish for 100 million and got 3 players. So it was like 3 players for the price of 1 type of thing, which I thought was really good business. And you know, and the food chain applies to them. Man City come knocking for Grealish. You've got to let him have his chance. The same for Buendia. You know, if he gets further up the Premier League and Villa starts knocking on the door. Ryan doesn't think so.
I was uncomfortable about the Grealish. I feel like he personally made a mistake, but that's part of my self-help podcast that's coming through.
I think Villa's business has been great this year, and also with obviously Jack going, managing to work with Manchester City and the agents as well to say, okay, look, we'll accept this deal, let's keep it all under wraps so that we can do our business, because if all of a sudden they got 100 million and they're knocking on the same doors for those players, you're going to be adding 5 million, 7 million, who knows what. So they've done really good business keeping it quiet. So yeah, good luck to him up there.
Yeah, the deal for Ings was peculiar, wasn't it? In the sense that nobody knew about it, and you know, a real rarity in the game. Okay, guys, we're gonna leave it there. Really appreciate everybody's contributions this morning. Paul, big thanks to you. I know you've put all the details about the podcast in the chat box. I'll certainly be checking it out. I'm on a flight tonight, so I'll get one downloaded and have a listen. Probably not the one with Tony. I'll
You've had enough of me.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for coming on. Really
thank you.
There. Really appreciate that. Tony, a few words from yourself before we let people go.
Yeah, I'm just going to share the trailer. We've got a trailer for our live event, which was kindly done by Julian Dow of Football for Football. So let me just share that before we go, and hopefully we will be seeing people in the actual flesh very, very shortly. I'm just trying to load it up now. Just hold on a second. There we go.
Technology has always been your friend, Tony.
This is it.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in this morning, and we'll see you first Thursday of October.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody.
Yes. Thanks guys.
Cheers,
Cheers, Joe. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye.